Philip French of The Guardian calls this movie an orgy of crudity that could only appeal to adolescents too young to be admitted. Tim Roby of The Daily Telegraph points out that nothing anyone does in this movie makes any sense. And Robbie Collin of News of the World says, Hall fail. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of Hall Pass.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. What's happening?
Greetings, Dan. How are you?
Greetings, John. Greetings, John. I'm doing well. It is a Friday night as we're recording this.
We really know how to tear it up on a Friday night.
We really do. I guess we're like the real version of Hall Pass. Like, this is it.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say that. I did, before we recorded, watch the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which it's interesting, seeing these spin-off TV shows from these movies. And as I'm watching it, I'm thinking about how, like, that's one of the things that we would talk about doing, like, for an idea on this podcast would be, to take a character or two and give them a series. So that was kind of fun. And I watched the new cut, the Snyder cut of Justice League over the course of the past couple days.
Okay, what's your take on it?
Well, I'm bringing it up because this is something that ties into what we talk about. Another way to bring back a property is, and this one is really brought on by the fans, is to release this Zack Snyder director's cut of a movie that came out in 2017, Justice League, that was not good. And
that he had initially was directing.
He was directing Joss Whedon.
And chose to.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to watch, knowing that this is something that, like, because the fans demanded it, eventually it was just like, you know what? Okay, let's make this happen. There was going to be a series, and then they just kind of made it all one big 4-hour-long thing. And I don't remember. I know I watched Justice League shortly after it came out, but I don't really remember much about it. But this is just my opinion. The Snyder Cut is bad. It's just like, I could not stop rolling my eyes. They were hurting 2 hours in, which is only halfway through. And it's silly. It's ridiculous. And it's like the CGI looks bad, and it's just perplexing. But anyway, that's just my opinion. I'm sure that there are people there who are enjoying it. That is not what I'm hearing so much, but I'm sure there are some people who are enjoying it.
I honestly, I feel like there's such a saturation of superhero comic, Marvel universe, DC universe, and there's so much.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, all right. So, I mean, I haven't seen the Snyder Cut. I saw the J.J. Abrams version, which I was like, or not J.J. Abrams, sorry, Joss Whedon.
Yeah.
Joss Whedon, sorry. And I was like, but maybe it's just me, but I feel like DC characters work, whereas the Marvel characters, some of them work really well on their own.
Yeah.
Sometimes they really work well. They complement each other. And I feel like the DC characters, they kind of have their standalone thing. And it's too much to me. It's too, like, the comic books, you can go crazy. You can do anything. You could have, Batman fights Superman, like old Batman fights young Batman, fights Superman, fights Lex Luthor. Like, you could do all that shit, like Scooby-Doo and Batman team up.
Yeah.
I don't know which I'm assuming because Scooby-Doo is on HBO Max that it is part of the DC universe. So
the Warner universe.
The Warner universe. In fact, I bet they've teamed up. Anyway, the point is, they're just not, to me, as someone I'm not like a comic book reader, really. Like, I enjoy them, and I have and I've like read some graphic novels, but it's just not like, I can't tell you every one of the X-Men. I could tell you the ones that were in the movies, and I can't I don't know the time that this happened with, Jean Grey, and I respect those who do. And
sure.
I've really just started to feel like these movies are more for them than they are for me.
Well, here's the thing. I had no problem with the characters, really. It was the filmmaking things that I was like, that's ridiculous, and like, that is so tropey, and I can't stand it. But like, okay, here's a moment. This will spoil nothing. There is a woman at an ATM who has like, a negative balance, or like $10 or something like that. And a character makes it so that she has over $100,000 suddenly show up in her bank account. And the screen of the ATM, when the number changes to like over $100,000, there's an animation of confetti on the screen. And it's like, in what world does a bank congratulate you for having over $100,000 suddenly? Through like
did like a toaster pop out of the ATM or something? You get a toaster.
So anyway, but Dan, I know that. Oh, what are you going to say?
Well, it's more of a question, because, all right, so we've talked about DC, we had talked about Batman, not directly, but in our Joel Schumacher month in July of last year, we discussed.
That was July. It was so long ago. Wow.
Yeah, I know. We're coming up on the next July, which will Joel Cohen. I don't know. You don't have to twist my arm to spend a month watching Coen Brothers movies. Some of them run through my mind constantly. And anyway,
you're asking me a question.
I totally got off track.
Yeah,
I was asking you a question. All right. So like the Batman, I loved the Batman movies and the Superman movies. And even though like, all right, the Superman movies were definitely still light, like Superman 2 for its time is pretty dark, because you have three people with the powers that Superman has.
Well, also you're talking about a movie that did the same thing as the Snyder Cut, the Donner Cut. Superman 2 is I think the first example of a movie where there was fan outrage, and it resulted in the release of a director's cut that would show the true intention of the filmmaker.
Yes, though the Donner Cut is not like, it's not really polished. No. It's very like, you could tell some of the less like, finished footage and things like that. And I mean, I've seen the Donner Cut. It doesn't change a whole lot.
Right. I'm just saying it's an example of this happening once before. And funny enough, with Superman movie. This
reminds me a lot more of the Exorcist 4 conundrum, where they had, I think it was Paul Schrader who was making Exorcist. I forget if what he was doing was Exorcist the beginning, or it is whatever Exorcist 4 was. But then the studio saw it and they're like, wait a second, there's not a whole lot of like exorcism in this. Like, we need more like head twisting around, spider walk, vomiting. And it was more of like a character study of like Stellan Skarsgård as Father Merrin. And then, so then they were like, we need to, to go back to Gaslight, we need to zhuzh this up a little bit. So they just had Rennie Harlan make his own Exorcist 4. Right. Actually, I think his was Exorcist. Yeah, his was Exorcist at the beginning, but it was still like the prequel about Father Merrin, Max von Sydow in the original. and Stellan Skarsgård in both of these, and he's great. But check out the Exorcist episode in the archives. But it was like two very different movies, and there was a fan, Warner Brothers. They released the Schrader cut. Dominion. It was called Dominion, a prequel to The Exorcist. Okay. I'm just wondering, I think the question that I started asking like an hour ago was about, are they just trying too hard to make it like artsy and dark and like, and Zack Snyder-y, which is to say like on like I'm talking Sucker Punch level.
Yes.
Zack Snyder-y.
Look, this is, we'll move on after this, but yeah, it's extremely Zack Snyder-y. There's people on Twitter who are putting out like the shot that was released in 2017 next to the exact same frame in 2021. And it's like, the contrast is done up and the blues are brought out, and like, it's just really, it's a lot colder, and I don't know. There's just some weird choices that seem like change for the sake of change. But anyway,
it looks like it always, like, to me, and don't get like, I actually kind of liked Man of Steel.
Yeah, Man of Steel. Hey, Michael Shannon. You don't have to convince me. But here's the thing. It's like every shot that doesn't involve somebody speaking is like slowed down just like ever so slightly. And
I'm thinking of like Batman versus Superman, and it was just so everything is so heavy, and it looks like a really well done Xbox game.
Yeah, totally. So anyway, we're talking
5.
about movies adapted from comics. Let's talk about a project that's adapted from Grisham. We have the return. The
Grishamverse grows.
Jake Brigance. Matthew McConaughey is reprising his role in the. Is it straight to HBO? It's a series. Is it a series?
It sounds like it's a series based on, and I believe that there were 2 other, if I remember correctly from our John Grisham episode in the archives, I believe there were 2 sequels, like one that had been published and one that was like coming soon. I don't know, I'm a time to retire. I don't know. He's not there yet. But yeah, it's a series based on the
this is A Time for Mercy.
A Time for Mercy.
That's
was that
the title
that was
of this
the
project?
So yeah, and right, it was a book. Oh, maybe there was only one. Maybe that was the only sequel.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Is Oliver Platt? Harry Rex?
I hope
is
Harry Rex
Rex
is back. I don't know what Oliver Platt's up to these days, but I sure hope so.
I mean, come on, like that's one of my, I guess, one of my many questions here. My second is, are they going to use this as a vehicle to expand the Grishamverse? And is like my vision of a series that like where Jake Brigance like meets like a witness protection Mitch McDeere. Does he try a case up against Reggie Love? Or do they work together on something? Like, can we get Susan Sarandon back? What? I mean, let's get her off Twitter.
Anyway, no, I'm curious to see what happens, and I don't know. I'm gonna watch it. I'm wondering if they're going to try to uphold the Joel Schumacher style to the series. So I'm just looking forward to seeing what comes of it. That's all.
I'm looking forward to it, and I hope this. So that's kind of my 2 wonderings: is, are we going to see other cast members returning, and will we see characters from other Grisham novels?
And Dan, feel free to let me know if you have any news items or anything that you wanted to bring up. But I just wanted to acknowledge pour one out for Yaphet Kotto. Alonzo Mosley himself from Midnight Run. Yes, but
and many
that
other
we've done. Go to the archives and listen to the Midnight Run episode, and you'll hear us sing the praises of Yaphet Kotto. And this is not the last that we will cover of his works. Oh wait, well, there's also the Running Man. So Running Man also,
right.
yeah.
The Running Man, the Running Man.
And I've got one more thing to mention about Justice League is that there is a reference to a bucket list. Dan. All right. So for anybody who hasn't been listening this month, or if you're new to the podcast, first of all, welcome. We are doing a month-long tribute to movies whose titles have coined popular words or phrases that did not exist in modern vernacular before this, with the exception being the Full Monty, which has its definition changed once the movie The Full Monty came out. And the first that we did was Bucket List, something that did not exist before 2007. And the more you watch movies knowing this, the more it comes up and you pick up on how commonly the term is used. It's just so fascinating. So we'll get there. We'll get there.
We've got, no, it really is quite something. And I mean, not to mention our last episode, Gaslight, a movie that has been sticking with me as I've been driving in the car going, Paula. Paula. But why don't you wear the brooch?
So what's interesting is that the word gaslight has come up. People have brought it up in conversation, talking about other people and stuff like that. To me, like after we recorded, and it's just like in the same day, two other people were talking about somebody who was gaslit, and it was like, oh boy, and it's all because of that fantastic film from '44.
Yeah, wow.
And we'll get on to our movie of the week in a moment, but I wanted to pay tribute to the ones that we're not covering this month. So we're not going to cover Catfish because that's a documentary. It'd be a challenging one to do, but Catfish, of course, is the act of posing as somebody else in usually like an online dating scenario, like you're online and you are posing as somebody else. And coined the term catfish. And another one that you just hear all the time. Sophie's Choice is one that we're not going to cover, but you very frequently hear people talking about a Sophie's Choice. Groundhog Day is one that we covered. And Groundhog Day, the definition kind of was redefined by this movie that implies the feeling of living the same day over and over and over again. Inception has come up, and that's just kind of like where it's used mostly to
just that feeling that the room is turning at a
and Joseph
90-degree angle,
is dressed very sharp. No, but it's kind of like the idea of there just being layers to things. I think is really like what it comes down to is like, oh, it's like a this within a that within a that. It's an Inception type of situation. You're looking at me kind of funny.
Oh. Like, well, yeah, no, just because that's like not, I mean, I feel like it's more of it's referred to more of when you made someone think something without them realizing you made them think
it. See,
I
never heard, I mean, yes, that is the plot of the movie, but that's not the way I've heard it used outside of the movie.
Oh, okay. That's the only way I've heard it used outside, where people have said like, "Oh, yeah, no, yeah, that's like, oh, you did that Inception
I've heard
thing
it
on me."
Where it's been in terms of like a movie that's about a TV show that's about a movie, or like something like that, where it's like
meta, meta,
but a step beyond meta. And anyway, I'm not saying I use it that way. I'm just saying that's how I've seen it used. Another one that has come up, which is, I think, in a lot of ways very similar, which is the Matrix. People talk often about like a glitch in the Matrix, or like any type of simulation.
We're in the Matrix,
a simulation.
Red pill, blue pill.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I mean, I honestly, like when you think about Matrix, the impact of the Matrix on just popular culture in general in the mainstream, there there's a few things that, and Matrix has we got Matrix Part 4
I know
coming up
and
this year.
Yeah, I feel like if and we will
the Wachowski cut.
And if we we'll of course talk about what we're covering on the next episode at the end of this episode, but I feel like Matrix was like the runner up. But I'm excited about what our choice is going to be. But also some other ones, and this of course is not. I mean, the nobody really watches this movie thinking this, but the novel Catch-22 defined the phenomenon of not being able to do something because something else would need to happen, but that thing can't happen unless the other thing happens. Like I can't get a job without the experience, but I can't get the experience without the job. It's Catch-22.
Get experience without the job,
type of thing.
Yeah,
but
that's so because that is perhaps my favorite. It's definitely my top 3 favorite novels of all time, and I absolutely love that book, and it's just hilariously funny. There are times when I remember the first time I read it laughing, and I was like, I don't know why I'm laughing, but I know this is funny. And I haven't seen the series, the George Clooney produced series yet, but and I actually have never seen the movie, the Mike Nichols directed film.
What got me curious about maybe visiting that, even though I haven't heard anything really good about it. I know it got some good reviews, but it's like, it's Mike Nichols. It's got a good cast. It's like, I'm sure I would enjoy watching it.
Arthur Garfunkel is in it. Arthur Garfunkel. That's the movie. I'm sorry. And then I will return from the tangent, but the Simon and Garfunkel song, Only Living Boy in New York references
Bucket List?
Art Garfunkel, the Bucket List. Yeah, no, Paul Simon came up with it. But it references Art Garfunkel going to shoot that movie. Like that line, Tom, catch your plane right on time. They started out as a duo named Tom and Jerry. And Art Garfunkel was Tom. So it was I know your part'll go on fine or something like that. So like the lyrics, the opening to that song, The Only Living Boy in New York, are references to
that's so funny.
Art Garfunkel going off to film.
Well,
Catch-22.
Should we ever cover that movie, we'll play that song at the end. That's all I gotta say. So now that we've talked about a bunch of movies and books and stuff that are good, let's talk about Hall Pass that isn't. And all right, I'm going to lay it out right up top. Very uncomfortable to watch.
Good.
I like to think that this movie wouldn't be made now. This came out 10 years ago. And
this script had to have been from the 90s.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's a buddy comedy about, I don't know, getting laid in your 40s.
It is like a couple of 15-year-olds whose parents are going through a rough time, decided to get together, and they were like, this is what married life is like, and this is going to be like us when it's us, because we're going to have hot wives. But for some reason, or like we're going to have, and not just hot wives, but like, you know, it's Jenna Fisher, Christina Applegate, who, I mean, God, Christina Applegate makes everything she's in better.
Okay. Right. So it stars Owen Wilson and Jason Sudeikis. This is one of the like earlier Jason Sudeikis movies. He was, I think, still on SNL for a few years beyond this. And he does his Jason Sudeikis thing, and I'm happy for it, but it doesn't make this movie any less misogynistic. And like, I'm sorry, but like, when there's any kind of like rape joke, no thanks. Yeah, it's just total cringeville.
Well, there's a lot. There are just so many. There's so much of this movie that it is just very, I mean, when I say the script had to have been written in the 90s, I I honestly think this was something that the Farrellys had laying around and for some reason got an opportunity to make it.
Allegedly,
and...
the Farrelly Brothers found this script from the person who wrote it, and they purchased it from that person for like 6 figures. And look, it's the Farrelly Brothers. We kind of know their deal. They've done things that have been smart, and like something like Dumber
Green Book,
something like Dumb and Dumber. If it has its gross out humor, but it's like it doesn't cross a line into a territory that makes you cringe. Right. And something like There's Something About Mary.
Actually, most of the rest of them do.
Yeah, There's Something About Mary. I think that, it's, there's the gross out humor. I haven't watched it in a long time, but
there's the whole, I think the portrayal of Warren, Mary's brother.
Warren is, of course, not okay.
Very problematic. Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, look, today versus the 90s. Yes, I actually think Dumb and Dumber, because I think no matter what in Dumb and Dumber, the only characters being humiliated are really Harry and Lloyd, Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey. And it's kind of like the joke is always on them.
Unless it's on the Gas Man.
But
right, yeah. It's just different, and
they get away with that. Kingpin,
it's funny. Kingpin, I think has strong moments, but there are of course moments where you just have, that just don't fly so much. But
cringe. Yeah,
but it's funny because you mentioned Green Book, and I feel like Green Book suffers from something very similar to Hall Pass, where it's like they think that they're doing something really good. With Green Book, it's like, look, we're telling this great story and amazing. And it's like, okay, you shouldn't be telling the story. And also the hero is the Italian guy. Like, come on. And in Hall Pass, it's like, we're going to make it so that these guys really do suck and they learn a lesson, but they just totally miss the mark and they mistreat the women in the movie.
And actually, I want to remember this point that you're making. For when we come back later and talk about, kind of where else we see this project, can we bookmark what you just said there? Because it ties in with something that I was thinking.
Okay, cool.
So,
well, why don't I go ahead and do a little synopsis?
Please.
Rick and Fred are a couple of married fuddy-dudds who can't seem to keep their minds out of the gutter. It's gotten to the point where their wives, Grace and Maggie, are annoyed to the point of wondering if their husbands even remotely appreciate them anymore. That's when they get a bit of advice from their friend, Dr. Lucille Gilbert, an accomplished psychologist.
Have you ever considered giving him a hall pass?
A what?
A hall pass. A week off from marriage.
No.
Wait a minute. Are you saying let them go out and cheat?
I'm saying give them a week off from marriage. Look, most married men have very foggy memories of their single days, and they begin to believe that if not for you, they could actually be with these other women.
That's Fred. Really, I mean, he thinks because he sees big tits all day long and he manages to make it home without squeezing one of them that I should be greeting him at the door like some conquering hero.
Well, maybe it's time to let them go out there and find out what it's really like.
Huh?
It's called the reactance theory. It's a wonderful principle in psychology which basically says that if you constantly tell someone they can't do something, they just want to do it more than ever. Conversely, if you remove the taboo, you remove the obsession.
You know what? I have an idea, Doc. Why don't you let your husband have a hall pass and then let us know how it turns out?
Oh, I have.
Are you telling us you let Charlie sleep with another woman?
I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you I gave him the freedom to choose for himself.
And?
All I know is our marriage is better than ever.
Maggie and Grace decide to try giving their husbands a 1-week hall pass to test once and for all how much their marriages mean to Rick and Fred. The week starts off pretty tame for the boys. They overindulge with their friends to the point that they're basically useless. Then they try a little too hard and just end up embarrassing themselves. Meanwhile, Grace and Maggie are enjoying a week away and end up spending time with Maggie's father, golf buddy Rick, which is confusing because that's her husband's name. Anyway, this Rick coaches a baseball team and he takes a shining to Maggie, whereas one of his star players is keen on Grace. Though Maggie feels conflicted about having any fun, Grace convinces her that this is an opportunity for them to live it up a little. While Maggie and Grace find themselves easily in scoring position, Rick and Fred continue to strike out. That is until they get a call from their buddy Coakley. Coakley lives his life one babe at a time and was recently gallivanting with Hawaiian tropic models. But now that he is back, Coakley is their ideal wingman. He brings them to a club where Rick spots his crush, Lee, an Australian barista who he has been unsuccessfully courting the past week, mostly due to his own negligence. But once he has the opportunity to spend a night with Lee, he realizes that this would be a mistake he would always regret. Fred, on the other hand, manages to get in bed with Rick's babysitter's aunt, but ends up uncomfortably pulling one of his old bedroom tricks that lessens his contact to the bare minimum. Meanwhile, Maggie wards off the advances of Coach Rick, but Grace ends up sleeping with the barely legal baseball player. In a moment of instant regret, she hits the bottle and ends up in a bad car accident. Once Fred and Rick find out, they rush to their wives and couldn't be happier to see them. With their marriages stronger than ever, it's safe to say that the Hall Pass week was a big, dumb success. So, Rick is played by Owen Wilson, Fred is Jason Sudeikis, Maggie is Jenna Fisher, and Grace is Christina Applegate. Joy Behar plays their psychologist friend, who I thought was actually pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she
Coakley
was barely in it.
Yeah. Coakley is played by Richard Jenkins, who, even though the character is deplorable, I like seeing Richard Jenkins in it. Some of their friends consist of J.B. Smoove, Stephen Merchant. I know I'm missing some of them.
Stephen Merchant. I mean, like, look, it is, the material is terrible, but
Terrible.
the cast is great. Larry Joe Campbell as Hoghead.
Hoghead, yeah.
Yeah, and is there anyone else that we're missing?
We're also missing Alyssa Milano plays a very, very small role. And
one of the
with like no lines. Yeah, she's just like a person at this housewarming party for this rich friend of theirs.
She's there. She's there enough for me to write down Alyssa Milano ?
Yeah, and also Andrew Wilson of the Wilson acting family is also.
I thought you were going to say the Wilson sisters.
The Wilson,
the
Wilson brothers. No, actually is Alyssa Milano's husband in this, and it's like. This takes place in Rhode Island. No one explains the two guys who happen to have the same Texas accent and essentially the same voice who happen to be friends with each other. Anyway, but yeah, I thought that it was confusing that there were two Ricks and no one ever brought that up. I guess the writer liked the name.
It's so funny because you said that about like the Texas drawl, and I was thinking about Owen Wilson in Royal Tenenbaums. I was like, oh, they just made him a cowboy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you think about it, you don't really think about it too much in Royal Tenenbaums. No. I don't think. I don't know.
No. That's not why you're there.
Yeah. So anyway, so talking about Lee, the barista, there's also this whole thing going on with her coworker, played by Derek Waters of Drunk History, and the whole backstory is that the two of them like kissed once and she was like, it was weird. And he's like obsessed with me, turning into like, he is completely and utterly obsessed with her and like tries to essentially kill them. He's shooting a gun at them. And by the way, we watched the unrated version. The unedited version. It's just raw.
I was
footage.
Gonna say
we watched the unrated. So there were a few extra scenes in there.
There were a few things that made me say, I think this might be the unrated version.
Yeah, including the scene with Army Hammer. He was the bouncer at the nightclub that they go to. They try getting into a nightclub and they give him like $50 and he lets them in. And then it cuts to them like at a hot dog stand because they just got kicked out.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I did not catch him. Maybe I was making a note at that moment. Who knows? But,
you were just so blinded by all the awfulness happening. You were just like, can't even process Army Hammer right now.
Well, and the fact that I was, and maybe this is just like, by the time I get to watching a movie, I'm pretty exhausted. My defenses are low, and I hated myself for it. But like there were, I would say, performances I laughed at, like Jason Sudeikis. I have a hard time not laughing.
His cadence is just funny.
He's just funny. His drunk scene when they're in the bar.
All right. Okay, I'm going to play a couple of clips. First, I'm going to play. So here's what happens. They go to this. They don't explain how they know some of these people, and you just have to be okay with that. But they go to this friend's house who's like, they're super rich, and they bring people over essentially just to show off their new house. And what ends up happening is Rick and Fred get split off from the group and end up talking about the women's bodies and just all these terrible things, while the rest of them are inside of a panic room that is showing full audio and video surveillance of the house. So they are just watching them say all these terrible
they do
things.
The whole Thurston Howell thing with Ed, the guy who owns the house.
That was funny.
Yeah,
that was funny because it was at the expense of, you know, a male character, and I don't know, there was nothing.
It was not
no racial stereotypes.
No racial stereotypes.
So
nothing
okay.
that was like no objectification. But oh my God, it doesn't. I can't say cross the line. That is not an extreme enough word.
No. So they get kicked out of the house, and then this is what happens in the car ride home.
Hey, anyone thinking chocolate chip cookie dough and a waffle cone?
Largemouth vaginas? You thought that was funny?
No.
Really? You were laughing like a hyena when he said it.
Well, I was embarrassed for Fred, to be honest. I was uncomfortable.
What the hell is wrong with you two? You are completely obsessed with sex.
Honey, obsessed is a very strong word.
Oh yeah? This morning you left the computer on cockgobblers.com.
I get my weather from that site.
I just thought that line was pretty funny. I mean,
the intelligent person in me is not laughing at that, but it's the end of a very draining week.
Well, that's when I texted you while watching it and said, I feel terrible that I'm laughing at this fucking movie.
Oh, I think I texted you during the housewarming party because my response, just to share, my response so John texted because he watched this a day or two before me. Oh boy, I gotta scroll back a while here. I hate that I'm laughing at Hall Pass. My initial response was I'm not there, but I understand. And then the next text in that chain is I'm there. So
yeah.
It's like
yeah, it's wow. I mean, for him to say the thing about getting an ice cream cone was pretty funny, and the Jason Sudeikis cadence, it just kind of works for me.
Yeah, and it's so like I feel like he has, and I think now he has a lot more of that like audience credibility, especially with Ted Lasso.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and, absolutely.
And you're just like, oh, he's so pure in that role, and in this role, he is so not.
So I'm going to play this other clip, and I think I probably cut off this audio clip before the point where he actually does get drunk, because he says things that make me so uncomfortable.
Oh, whew.
I forget where I cut it off. Let's find out.
I feel like donkey kicking everyone in this bar. It's unbelievable.
Hey, keep your chin up. Okay, no one said this was going to be easy. Even in college, it took 50 rejections for every one score, remember?
Yeah.
Of course, it didn't sting as much when you were drunk.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's what we should do then. We should get drunk.
You're right. We're too stiff.
I know.
Let's get the creative juices flowing.
Yes.
Let the soul come to the surface a little bit.
Yeah, that's when we're at our most charming.
You say no to me? You say no to me? No. Flip it. I say no to you.
Okay, so I just cut it off there.
Oh yeah. Oh good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets really bad from there, but I was cracking up and hating myself for it at the same time, and the harder I laughed, the more I hated myself.
Totally.
Because Jason Sudeikis is so
he just goes off the
good.
rails, and I don't know. He's fantastic. I just hate this movie so much.
It's so yeah.
Yeah,
it's so funny because it's like it's misogynist, but it also is not really complimentary to men either, and it just basically is like, yep, this is what guys do. We're either loading up on wings and burping, or getting off awfully drunk and saying the worst things of the world. And it's just kind of like, it's kind of demeaning on every front.
Totally.
And there's some pedophilia thrown in there. It's like light. It's not like, we're not talking, but like the whole thing with, I guess not pedophilia, but like the whole thing with the babysitter. It's such a it's such this like fantasy, like this, and this again ties into where I'm going with one of my ideas for this, but it's such this like, oh wow, okay, the like Alexandra Daddario babysitter, is hitting on me.
Well, here, let's talk a little bit about that, because we didn't cover that at all. So their babysitter is this girl named Paige. She's a junior in college. She's like in a sorority. She's about to turn 21, and she, as we learn, has a crush on Rick. At the beginning of the movie, he's dropping her off at her sorority house, and she tries to get him to buy her beer, and he kind of like has this kind of flash of like a daydream of them having a drink by a lake and then him getting arrested. And when she tells him like, I don't get it. It's like, 20 is old enough to drink and buy porn, or sorry, not drink. 20 is old enough to like vote and buy porn, watch porn or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, that you only have to be 18 to, and she's like, to vote? Yeah. He's like, yeah. And the other thing, she's like, oh yeah, watch porn. So yeah, that's kind of funky. And then towards the end, she runs into him when they're at a club, and she is like, you know what? I'm so sorry. I was actually flirting with you that night, and I know you have this hall pass, and I'm 21 now, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, she, basically says, let's do this. And he says like, no, that's crossing a line. You're our babysitter. And, I wasn't as, I don't know, skeezed out by that.
I guess I wasn't skeezed out by the content in the movie. I was kind of like, it's indicative of the writing and the mentality in the writing. And I felt like, and this is, I guess, true for a good amount of Farrelly Brothers movies, is that they're very much these like fantasies.
Yeah.
And because it's like, what fantasies, like, their lives are not bad.
No.
They're, fairly normal, at least like from what we gather of Rick and Maggie. We see a lot more of their home life.
Yeah, but we still see that, Jason Sudeikis and Christina Applegate, like, they've got a nice house. They have a Honda Odyssey fully loaded touring edition. Like, they're doing well. I don't know. There doesn't seem to be anything that's a big problem. It's like, Rick and Maggie's kids are seemingly out of the way. You know, they don't seem to really show up much, except at the beginning. And
well, yeah,
which there was one thing that bothered me. There's, they get back from this event and he's trying to Rick is trying to get frisky with Maggie, and they go to the room and there's their daughter sitting in their bed, and she's like, can I sleep in your bed tonight? And he's like, no, definitely not. And she's like, words hurt. And he's like, words hurt. A belt hurts. And like, he mentions how he was brought up with and it's like, don't threaten.
But that's another thing.
Yeah.
That's another like, this was written by Pete Jones. It's just more indicative that this was, I would at least assume, written like before we kind of realized that, like, hey, this is not fodder for comedy. This is not something to be taken lightly. And but there are people in the, like, that's not that we need.
Right, but also it's like, even if it was written in the 90s, it was still made in 2009, 2010, something like that. And they should have known better. And another thing that's like a conscious choice is the scene where Rick is at the health club and he passes out in the the hot tub. And, his like legs are numb and he gets pulled out by these two stark nude guys. One of them is black. One of them is Irish. And the black guy has a huge dick and the Irish guy has a very small one. And it's like, you didn't have to assign race or nationality that have stereotypes. They could have just been two dudes, any race or nationality.
You could have had the same joke without involving ethnicity.
Because
and
honestly,
race.
Funny joke. I liked it. I thought that it was funny, but it shouldn't. I really didn't like that. There was race or nationality assigned to it.
You didn't need it, and it's an old joke. It's done.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you could retire that one because that's been so done. And I'm talking like even by 2011. I also felt there were some missed opportunities, like with the when Mark Waters, the barista,
Derek Waters.
when he's Derek Waters, right? When Derek Waters is, when the guys are driving. When they're driving off after they get out of the club, I think, right? That's where they were.
Where he is, when the barista is DJing.
Right. And I was thinking to myself, because that like he's coming after them. I was like, oh, are they going to have him? Are they going to do a little Cape Fear thing?
Well, they did kind of
and have it where he's under.
Yeah, they had him on top of the car, which
he was on top of the car.
Yeah. I mean, you would be able to see him if it was under the car. I don't know. I mean, Cape Fear.
What? No, yes, you'd see the like. Why not? Why? It's a fucking Farrelly Brothers movie. Why not just make the fucking, like, buy the rights to play that bit of the score, like, and like, why not? Why not? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. This movie's bad. This movie's troublesome. How do we get out of this?
All right. So, first of all, and before we get out of this, we have to point out that this movie, meta, references the bucket list.
I guess I still have a lot to get out of my system before I do the whole marriage trip, I'm one of those people who wants to try everything once before I die.
And the good things twice. Like swim with the dolphins.
Yeah, I'd love to meet the Dalai Lama.
Sure. Bungee jump.
No, I've already done that.
Skydiving.
Skinny dip in the Indian Ocean.
Sleep with a married guy. I just mean if that was one of the things on the old bucket list, I could help you cross that off, to sleep with a married guy. What did you say, the Indian Ocean?
So it couldn't.
When I saw Rick flirting with the Australian girl, I knew he was trouble.
It couldn't have been final draft locked in the 90s. It had to have been after 2007.
Yes.
But I think that part of it was written in the 90s because mentioning bungee jumping is certainly a very 90s thing.
Yeah. I feel like there was something else.
I do feel like the Farrellys are a little, and Green Book is probably an exception, but like they're probably stuck in their glory days of the 90s where that was where their comedy really struck.
So I think that, first of all, like the joke about the first night that the guys go out. Oh, first, I enjoyed how they have the little Law and Order for each day. Yeah. But I thought that, you know, when they're like, all right, yeah, are you guys ready to party? Let's go. And then pan to Applebee's.
Yeah.
I was like, that feels like that joke, even in 2011, was old.
Yeah. So, and I will say, like, I feel like they really made them look like the fuddy-duddies they're supposed to look like, you know, wearing clothes that are like a size too big and definitely not anything close to, like, probably very inexpensive clothing. It worked for the effect of everything. Driving minivans, the Honda Odyssey thing, I think was funny.
That
Probably
was great.
Product integration. Seeing the way that there's just the visual moment of him opening the door by just like touching the handle or whatever, and it opens up. Like, that's a very product integration note where they're just like, we have to make sure that we see him from this type of angle, opening the door just by touching the thing. Yeah. So,
well, what about the scene where he masturbates in the car? Do you think that was,
you know what?
Maybe
Maybe they got a discount for that one. Yeah.
And sticks.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
That scene was one of those where I was laughing and really just when the cops pull up and they catch him and they shine the flashlight and yeah. That was, another one. I'm like, why am I laughing?
Before we move on, I do just want to talk a little bit more about Maggie and Grace and the situation that they're going through. I think that the two of them have a great dynamic together. Jenna Fisher is obscenely tan in this movie. I don't know what happened there. And I'll just play one quick clip from... So this is after they have been invited to go get a beer with the baseball team, the baseball coach.
We're all going over to the players' digs for some beer and brats. Why don't you all join us?
Yeah. No, we have to get the kids home.
Go, have some fun. You haven't been out all week. Your mother and I have the kids. We've got Paige.
Hey.
No problem.
I don't know, Dad. We weren't really planning on...
Maggie, come on. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a belly flop contest in the pool. Y'all can be judges.
We're in.
Great. Let me just clean up here and you can follow me over.
Great. I'll go round up the kids. What are you doing?
Huh?
Those guys are still in college. And in case you forgot, we're married.
To who? Because you know what? The last that I checked, Rick and Fred had the week off from marriage. So, remind me again, who were we married to?
Well, I guess one beer won't kill us.
Oh, that's my girl. Come on, why can't we have some fun? God knows our guys are living it up.
What would you rather do? Make out with a guy or let him blow you? And you gotta pick one or your whole family will die. That's the rule.
Okay. So, just talking about the women, I had to include that one bit just to,
the transition. Yeah.
I feel like they're completely right. Absolutely. You know, it's like, do have fun. Like, I don't know what's going on in their lives that they can just, it must be over the summer or something and they have jobs where they can just disappear. But it's, I don't know. I feel like their connection feels pretty authentic and I feel like they have valid points when they talk about this kind of stuff. And clearly they let things get a little out of hand. And I don't love the way that they are portrayed when it does come to the relationships that they're kind of forming with these guys. And yeah, because it's like, she's clearly having this conflict about the coach And yes, she has given a hall pass to her husband, but there's still an amount of like emotional cheating that's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is semantics, because I agree, like, you know, they have their points, but it's also not anything that the guys asked for. Well, I guess Fred kind of did.
Well, yeah.
I mean, but regardless, yeah, it's they're having, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of a tit for tat move where it's like, okay, we have to have this happen, but it's almost like the guys' connections need to be, you know, much less formal, and it needs to be like, we need to know that it's nothing that they're doing is going to change anything. Whereas with Grace, to I guess a certain extent, but even more to Maggie, as she's really like, you know, getting into this, you know, relationship with the coach. Yeah. I also get really uncomfortable with, like, I don't know, I get uncomfortable with the whole cheating thing. And yeah, it's kind of like, it's when I begin to like really, I don't know, I guess lose some, I guess, respect for the characters. Yeah. I mean, she doesn't.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, spoiler alert.
So
10-year-old spoiler alert. Actually, almost exactly 10 years old. It was released February 2011. Right. Yeah.
So here's the difference, I think, between Rick and Fred. Owen Wilson's character and Jason Sudeikis' character. Okay, what we see of Rick is that he unconsciously checks out another girl while he's with his wife, and there's maybe a couple of like offhanded comments. You know, the beginning of the movie is him going through a very poorly photoshopped photo album of his past with his kids, and they mention that their mom doesn't wear bikinis anymore because she has a fat ass. And he's like, yeah, well, and then snaps out of it. It's like, no. And it's like, we don't really see him doing too much to deserve this. And honestly, the whole scene at the fancy house where they get caught talking about all this stuff, you know, Fred is the instigator. He kind of builds up Rick and gets him to kind of go along with it. But it's, you know, initiated by Fred. And, you know, you get the impression that Owen Wilson's character is kind of going through the motions a little bit because of his friendship with Fred, and that he doesn't really want to be with another woman, but he just kind of like, you know, it's the style of humor that his friend has, and he goes along with it. Yeah. And I think that Fred is a little bit, you know, more unhappy in his marriage, if you had to compare. But there, it's also, that's the thing, is there's also like this balance between the two couples where with Rick and Maggie, you know, Rick they come like equal, I mean, maybe not equally close, but somewhat equally close to sleeping with somebody else, but they ultimately don't. And we see that Rick doesn't sleep with what's her name, Lee.
Lee, thank you. He doesn't, even when she offers herself to him, and that Maggie, you know, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. We know,
but we know that Grace sleeps with the baseball player, and Fred,
he doesn't. Okay, so what he does is what is it called, the fake chow or something like that.
Fake chow, but I imagine he at least like kisses,
and
like,
there's some sort of you know, contact that is not kosher. So yeah,
right. But you can tell, like, even before it starts, like, he's kind of like, oh, it's kind of like a what?
And not to mention, the person that he is doing this with thinks that he is Rick. So the woman is Paige's aunt, who is also the male barista / DJ's mother. It's a whole thing. And yeah,
that's
and
right.
she goes to the hotel because Paige tells her, like, I tried to make an advance. He said no. This is where he's staying, whatever. And the aunt comes to find him and says, like, I'm so impressed and blah, 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 blah. But Fred is pretending to be Rick. So not only is he cheating on his wife, but he's doing it pretending to be somebody else, which is like an extra level.
He's catfishing her. He's catfishing her.
Yes. And yeah, it's bad.
Here's another thing, like a little logic gap. So part of the reason why Maggie kind of allows things to go as far as they do with Coach Rick is because she finds out that husband Rick has not been at home.
Yeah, the housekeeper calls.
And it's like they've been in touch, like they've apparently, like, they do call each other. Why wouldn't he tell her that he's staying in a hotel for the week?
I don't know. Also, it's like credit card.
I know. I mean, why am I know?
It's like it's not going to be a secret.
Looking for logic in all the wrong places.
Also, it's like this move is not your first response. There needs to be, at least I feel, a few more layers of counseling before you get to the point where you do something like this. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And that was another thing that was another place where I kind of felt uncomfortable in general. Like they really went, to the extreme. But again, we're not supposed to expect this to be realistic.
It's a Farrelly Brothers movie.
A latter Farrelly Brothers movie.
So
as well.
Dan, on the subject of Farrelly Brothers movies, and we had talked about Green Book before, and how this movie and Green Book kind of have the sensation of the Farrelly Brothers feeling like they're doing the right thing, but really missing the mark. How does that play into what your idea is? I'm very curious about this.
I guess the only way, the Farrelly Brothers.
Well, you were saying that we'll come back to that concept when it comes time for you to talk about your idea.
Oh, so, okay. All right. So it actually comes down to, as we're talking about this movie, it's almost like we're talking about the Farrelly Brothers as auteurs. And they are known, for a certain brand of film.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what it plays into is a movie that this made me think of. Not a movie that this reminded me of, but that made me think of. And that's Sideways.
Okay.
And because I think the first thing that I thought about was, it's like, I know, like, these guys are playing the pathetic, but I'm like, this movie would make sense if the guys were more like, I want like that Paul Giamatti in Sideways level of kind of, not, I don't want to say pathetic, but like that, just like self-deprecation.
Yeah.
And so one of my ideas was, I was like, I would love to see Alexander Payne take on the subject. I was trying to think of what has he done around marriage? And, I was thinking about Schmidt.
Okay.
But that's after his wife dies, and that's when he kind of goes on his vision quest, which I need to watch that movie again.
We were just talking about it recently.
Yes.
On the bucket list episode.
Yes, exactly. So I was thinking about Alexander Payne, and I was thinking about Sideways and the Descendants, films like that where, and I'm like, I don't really see any reason to do anything with this concept, but I feel like if you want to take on, in a somewhat comedic way, the topic of, it also, the movie also reminded me of The 7-Year Itch.
Yeah.
So it brings to mind things like that, which are kind of a little bit more like the reality base of kind of like the routine of marriage and the point in your life when you know, and like looking and how some people are more fixated on previous periods in their lives. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure we can all, you know, as we get older, look back to previous times and be like, oh yeah, man, oh, that was awesome. And like, oh, to experience that again. We're not to the extreme of hall pass.
No.
And I think Alexander Payne could actually capture something like this without making it. It could actually do a story like this without making it offensive and making it funny, but also a more character based and like, let's get inside the minds of these people and see like what have the effects of their lives been on them.
Dan,
yes.
I just realized what this movie is. It's seconds.
Election? Oh, it's seconds.
It's seconds. They're stuck in these ruts of their lives, and it's causing problems, and their marriages aren't what they used to be.
Wow.
So, you know, they don't get facial reconstructive surgery and become Rock Hudson and you're an artist living in Malibu, but you're living a new life, and you're
Coakley. Dude, Coakley
with the Hawaiian Tropic models, which, by the way, what's the Farrelly's obsession with Hawaiian Tropic models? That's in Dumb and Dumber too.
They're
the only people who care about the Hawaiian Tropic models. Anyway.
Auteurs.
So anyway, it's seconds, and then he, you know, has remorse, realizes how how good his life was, and how by doing this he's not being himself, and you know, forget the whole cult.
That's in our archives, our episode on John Frankenheimer's Seconds.
Yeah. So anyway, Dan, as you were talking about all that, It was just like, holy shit, it's Seconds.
So Alexander Payne remaking Seconds.
Yeah, kind of.
As Hall Pass. I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, you know, it's also like, I guess I've also been thinking recently, like, I don't remember, like, what was the last Alexander Payne film? Was it Nebraska?
Was that Alexander Payne? Okay.
Yeah.
Then probably. I think so. Yes. I liked Nebraska a lot. I actually, I work with the composer, Mark Orton. He does the music for the podcast I do in my real life, my work life. But no, it's a fantastic movie. It's, you know, Will Forte doing Bruce Dern, but Will Forte doing a serious thing. Yeah, June Squibb being hilarious as always.
Yeah.
In a serious movie, you get June Squibb being hilarious. How great is that?
I mean, but that's what Alexander Payne does. Anyway, I was thinking that, and then on the other end of the spectrum I was like, this could also work as one of those like kind of trashy reality TV shows, like Wife Swap. And it would just like Hall Pass. And it was like these two best buds are getting a week off from marriage, but so are their wives. And we've got camera crews following them around. And but it's also like, I could see that working like this, like 15 years ago. Maybe not now. It's like what was it? Temptation Island.
Yeah.
Really, there's no reason to do anything with it. What do you think?
So here's what I was thinking. I mean, of course, Owen Wilson's been around. He's done, you know, a lot of movies that have had some prestige to them. You have Jason Sudeikis, who is just now at that point in his career where he's being looked at as more of a serious comedic actor with Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso, which I don't know if you've seen it, Dan. It's great. It's as great as everyone says it is. And
I'm getting through it. I'm a few episodes in, and absolutely,
it's a real delight, and he's fantastic in it. And what I'm thinking is like, what if Jason Sudeikis is being considered for like, I don't know, a Mark Twain comedy, you know, humorist award, or whatever. I don't know, something like that. I know he's not at that level, but it's some sort of recognition. But they go into his past and realize that he did hall pass. And this is a movie, with Jason Sudeikis and Owen Wilson playing themselves, realizing that this is a very dark mark on an otherwise pretty decent record, if not great record. And they go on a mission to erase it from history. They find out that all of the like DVDs and Blu-rays of it that are purchased are, there are very few that are still in circulation. A lot of them are just sitting in dollar bins at used, movie places and stuff like that. And it's not on any streaming services. And, it's like they realize that they are at a place in their careers and their fortunes where they could potentially have this movie. And what made me think of it was actually the Gaslight 1944 remake, and how the desire was to destroy the prints of the 1940 version and kind of erase that from history. It didn't end up happening, but that's where I was kind of getting the idea for this. But basically, they try to create a Mandela effect, where it's like, I could swear there was a movie with Owen Wilson and Jason Sudeikis where there's the cover where they've got a thing and it's called Hall Pass. And and it's like,
so they attempt to gaslight the world and convince it that Hall Pass never.
Yeah, they attempt to create a glitch in the Matrix. They attempt to.
So on their bucket list. So this is on their bucket list.
Yeah. So that's my idea. Is they use their.
Oh my
celebrity.
God, John. The climax of the movie, it comes down to it. It's a real Sophie's Choice situation where it's the last copy.
Yeah. And then they end up having to inception people by convincing them that they, So.
They get rid of it and it ends with them realizing that, no, that's a bad idea.
So anyway, that's my idea, is them trying to create a Mandela effect type of situation where they erase this movie from history.
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. No,
it's
a little different.
It's a little different.
I think that is, wow, that's far out, but I would want to see that. I would pay money. I would pay $19.99 to rent it.
See, it's also, and I know that this isn't as much of a coined a term type of situation, but like a global eternal sunshine, just kind of erasing it from people's memories. So a couple of things actually before we wrap up. One thing that I forgot to mention, first of all, this is a strong recommendation for our listeners to check out our past guests podcast, I Saw What You Did. Millie DeCherico and her co-host Danielle Henderson are truly delightful. It's a podcast about movies. You don't have to have seen the movies to appreciate it. It's their rapport with one another is really, really delightful. And they are currently doing a bracket for the month of movies that they're running through Instagram stories called Was It Good or Was I Horny? And it's it kind of came up because they were talking about a movie that Millie talked about on our podcast when she came on for The Cutting Edge. She talked about Memphis Belle because of DB Sweeney, the star of The Cutting Edge, who was also in 8 Men Out and Memphis Belle. And they talk about Memphis Belle on their podcast. And it's so great to hear her talk about this movie because they're talking about movies from their like high school years that were very like formative. And that was one of them for her. And I got a direct message on Instagram from Millie and Dan. Millie got an email from DB Sweeney because he caught wind of the Memphis Belle chatter on their podcast. And I hope that I'm not scooping this from their podcast. But Millie shared it with me just because we, talk about, DB Sweeney. And it was real fun to see him interacting with her. And
wow,
the power of the
fantastic.
internet.
I hope that droopy thing didn't
whatever. He didn't see whatever she's. I don't think that she used the word droopy on her podcast talking about it, but.
Well, no, I think that, and I think that, yeah, that was pretty much.
But she does
just
say
me.
some things, but she agreed that. But she does say some things that aren't necessarily glorifying DB Sweeney. You know, it's not all super praise. But anyway, I feel like there was something else. My only other note is that one of the other things that made me so uncomfortable about this movie is like. When I was younger and would go to bars with my friends before we all, essentially got married and everything like that, it was always so uncomfortable to watch my friends like be horny and flirt with people. And this is a whole movie about that, about showing people do that. And it just makes me so uncomfortable. But anyway, yeah. Oh, I have one other thing to mention.
Yeah.
In the intro, the first reviewer that we mentioned is named Philip French, and made me think of our buddy French Fry Phil. So French Fry Phil, if you're listening, just want to give you a little howdy. And we haven't heard from you in a bit, so we hope you're doing well.
Hope all is well. Yeah, absolutely. So shall I unveil our final episode of this movie changed the way we talk month. So we're bringing now, this movie not only gave us a phrase, but it gave us a signature sound. And because it is hard to think of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly from 1967 without thinking of that classic music. I'm not even.
Yeah, it's so funny. We were debating for a while about what to cover for this last episode. We had the other 4 dialed in, but this March is one of those 5 Tuesday marches, and going back and forth about things was tough. And then I don't know, like all of a sudden I just remembered about The Good, the Bad. I think that I might have seen a poster for a different spaghetti Western, and I was like, oh my God, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's such a commonly used phrase that was birthed by this film.
Absolutely. So yeah, we got Clint Eastwood, Eli Wallach, Lee Van Cleef, and I don't know. I'm excited to check it out. A little spaghetti Western action.
This is our first more traditional Western.
Our first true Western. Yeah. We had this debate, City Slickers. I think
Western. I think it counts.
Not a true Western.
But it definitely is in the Venn diagram somewhere in the middle.
It is on the outskirts. There's like that other bubble. There's that growth on the Venn diagram of like contemporary Western comedies, I guess. Okay. I don't know what else. Rango, maybe.
Well,
we'll figure it out.
I'm really excited to watch this one. I believe it's on Prime Video, and I don't know if I've ever seen it. Maybe when I was little. I don't know.
I've seen. I mean, yeah, as most small children do.
Dan.
I didn't see. I've seen this. I actually don't know that I've ever seen the whole thing. So I'm excited.
I have a feeling that it was one of those things where it's like it was on like USA, and I was like, "Oh, this is a famous movie," and then I probably conked out like 20 minutes in. Like, yeah, that's probably how it went when I was like 10 or something.
Sounds about right. Well then,
yeah. Well, Dan,
it's time to ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, well, exactly. As you ride off into the sunset in your Honda Odyssey fully loaded touring edition with a boat hitched to the back, I wish you a good journey.
A good journey.